Love music, love life. This is Freshly Pressed with Zibby and my analyst this morning. As always, we love it when you're part of the conversation. Let us know what your thoughts are. So WhatsApp number is 0809 440 And of course, you can also tweet at Smooth981. Good morning, Chibuzor, and good morning, Uade.
Good morning, Zibby.
Good morning. Lovely to have you this beautiful, upbeat, petrol-less day.
Yeah, good morning, Lagos. I hope people managed to get some sleep and they didn't have to sleep on the fuel lines overnight.
And those who had to get to work early didn't have to wake up too early to get to work on Lagos Island today. Good morning, Lagos.
All right, well, let's get straight in. And we're starting off with Punch. Aviation workers strike grounds flights at Lagos Airport. Now, according to NACO, which is the Nigerian Aviation Handling Company, this strike is due to issues surrounding salary increments. And international flights were halted. In fact, an affected passenger and aviation expert said that NACO staff in the early hours of yesterday walked out of the international airport saying they were on strike and they would not handle any passenger. Now, NACO handles check-in, boarding, and ramp services for different international airlines flying from the country.
Well, this is unfortunate again that we are going to be losing so much in terms of revenue due to the strike, and it comes again as usual because of salary increments. We know that the economy is really nothing to write home about. Inflation is over 21%, almost 22%, and workers like if we go to by the time we get through another story, we'll find out that even the salaries that used to take them to the bus stop is no longer taking them there. So I guess that's what the issue is. But a quick one on the lighter side is if they grounded all planes that could come in that would bring us revenue into Nigeria, why was the president still being able to fly from Abuja to Lagos? Well, maybe it's just a 1 hour journey and those arrangements had been made. But the thing about it for me is that, well, the Air Force and other emergency services would have taken control of that, and it wasn't going to carry so much baggage. It was just going to come down and get into his car at the tarmac and go on. But it's so sad that the beginning of January we're already looking at another situation whereby hundreds of millions or even not billions of naira will be lost as a result of another strike. If this continues, be rest assured that not only will it disrupt flights in Nigeria, it would also disrupt flights coming into Nigeria through the international space, and it is really, really sad. Really, really sad. They should do something about it quickly and try and get them back to work through negotiations and everybody is asking for a salary increase. Yeah, I understand, but really, is the money taking us anywhere? Even the monies they're making, how much is it? Cost cutting is the bane of the Nigerian economy in the last 2-3 years. COVID didn't help matters, but it's sad that we have to go through this because I'm not sure any of the airlines could fly in yesterday as usual, and we're losing so much revenue from that.
All right. What is that your generator I hear in the background?
Yeah, as there's no fuel, there's no lights. So I haven't had light for 5-6 days.
Wow. Okay, well, apologies if you can hear that sound, but it's also just a reflection of the reality of living in Nigeria. So let's move on to the next story. And this one has to do with the Lekki deep sea port. Now, the president stated that the $1.5 billion Lekki deep sea port is in line with the administration's economic recovery growth plan. And he's added that he's ever ready to lend his support to game-changing infrastructural projects that could positively impact on trade and commerce in the country.
Okay, so for everybody who's living in Lagos and working on the island or around the island, obviously there's good news and bad news. Good news is that, yes, this comes with a lot of benefits or a lot of benefits potentially. Bad news is that, as we all know, when the president visits, he comes with his bags of goodies. One of them is traffic. But it also speaks to a larger thing in construction of the deep sea port and some of the fears of the guys who stay in that area about the potential of an Apapa-like scenario breaking up in the Lekki axis, which basically has one axis way in and out. But if I'm going to try and balance on the positives and, well, without overemphasizing the negatives of this. So I use the word potentially. Potentially, these are one of the investments that can pay for itself down the line if it's handled properly. And we're hoping as Nigerians and keeping our fingers crossed as Nigerians that this will deliver the benefits in the long term or what is expected. So the deep sea port is 1.5 billion has gone into this deep sea port. There's various partnerships in constructing it all around. Was constructed by the Chinese harbor construction company, and the president has kicked it off. I believe the first container arrived there yesterday, if I'm not wrong. And what we expect, there's a lot of comparisons to what the kind of ships about the size and tonnage that's allowed through there, like compared to what happens in the Panama Canal, which is world renowned. So we expect a lot of traffic to be moving there for the kind of product, especially given the fact that there's the Dangote refinery in the same axis, and there's a lot of, if anybody's living in Lagos, I'm sure you must have gotten one of those flyers for property with 5 minutes to Lekki, and those things. So we expect a growth in that area, and we also expect a direct correlation of that growth in that area to the economy of Lagos State, and hopefully to the economy of Nigeria, larger economy of Nigeria. What we already see today is that obviously if you've been in Lagos, or if you've lived in Lagos all your life as someone like me, you have noticed the growth in that area, things like traffic, the population size in that area. I stand to be corrected, but I think the population in that area has grown to be more dense than even the other parts of Lagos in the last 10 years, from a place that was relatively sparsely populated. And one of the things that needs to be sorted out, obviously, is access out of that place. Unless, if we don't sort that out long or middle term, we might be facing another Papa type issue. So yes, there are a lot of benefits with the construction of this container port. We expect to see more of our things like, we expect to see stuff like the products from the Dangote refinery leaving via that route, going to other parts of the world. We expect to see other products coming into that, reducing some of the pressure on our Papa. But if you reduce the pressure on our Papa, it still comes out the same way, then we're just dealing with multiple points of failure. So, but yes, it will provide a lot of jobs, potentially. It will provide opportunities for economic expansion and growth. And I have to give it to it. If we make this work, it will be a big plus to the state. Obviously, the Lagos state government, although this has been on for a while, but yes, this has been delivered finally. So that's a big plus, yeah. But for the rest of Lagosians, please brace yourselves out for today's traffic and just be patient. It will pass. Thank you.
A message of hope.
Sorry, just to add to what Chibuzor said, I think one thing I think they missed out, which should have been part of the planning, was to build a rail evacuation system, so that you can easily reduce the kind of road traffic that would maybe not now, but maybe in the next 2-3 years, that you would expect to see there. There are so many exits through there, going through Ekpe and hitting Ikorodu and hitting Ijebu. But those are things that could easily have been put into that design to also improve the speed and quality of logistics in that area. Just wanted to note that.
Yeah, true. There needs to actually be a lot of investment into infrastructure in that area to provide multiple points of exit and multiple means of exit, more or less. I think that's the key word, means of exit from that area.
Well, let us know what your thoughts are. The WhatsApp number is 0809 444 0981. Let's move on to this day. Organized labor has charged state governors to reduce cost of governance, block conduit pipes for corruption, create infrastructure development, and also improve welfare of workers in 2023. Now, the Lagos State chairman of the NLC, Fumi Sesi, who had described 2022 as a rather difficult year for workers, commended the government for prompt payments of workers' salaries and urged others to do same?
Well, good message from her. And one state that you're sure that hasn't reneged on worker salaries is Lagos State. We can't say much about so many of the states in Nigeria where even the statutory allocation is actually not taking the state home at all. At the end of the day, for me, is rather than make all these statements, is encourage the workers to be part of the democratic process. And if you think that your governor or the governor of your state or the leaders within the state are not doing the right thing, one of the things to do is to encourage your workers to participate in the electoral process, because your ballot really would speak so much. If you have a governor that is not performing, hasn't paid salaries for 8 months, or haven't paid salaries for 3 months, don't pay pensions, then you should ensure that you also speak to that, because the fact of the matter remains is you're doing your work and you're not getting paid. And it creates room for so many things, so many under the hand things that sometimes you find in the civil service. So yes, great speech about telling governors who are not paying salaries to pay on time, those who haven't even started paying the minimum wage, asking for an increment in salary, knowing the fact that a lot of these states cannot even pay what is expected of them, and so on. But I think where she really did miss out for me was to encourage the state workers and members of the state civil service across board to ensure that, so teachers, you just name them, to ensure that their votes count. They register to vote, they update their voters card, and always turn out en masse to vote for who they believe and think could progress the states. And I'll leave it at that.
I'm just curious, Wadi, is there ever any valid reason? I mean, people who are actively working are being owed, even people who have retired are being owed. I can't really wrap my head around it. What's the rationale for that happening consistently across Nigeria?
Well, I think one of the reasons for that is the governors or those who lead those things, even organizations, don't care about the welfare of their staff. They think they're doing them a favor, by employing them or putting them in employment. And at the end of the day, oh yeah, he's doing it because he needs the money. Yes, we do need the money, but your work is growing. I was somewhere over the weekend and we're talking about organizations that you can see that they're making so much money, and the owners are buying brand new cars and sponsoring shows, and their staff have not been paid for 2 3 months, and it's just like that. So it's not just in the civil service, it also happens in private sector, and you can actually see that those in the organization can see that money is being made and salaries are not just being paid. So I usually I commend those who own businesses and those governors who pay salaries on time, because it takes a lot when you have to consider the fact that you can see so much money, but you have to give out a handful of it to those who help you provide the money. Some people are just not, they're just reckless about it.
So I think I just like to chip in a bit. I do know in one or two countries where there is legal recourse for people who are owed salaries over a period of time. I think in India there's some law that allows them to do that. And I think, yes, what is hit the nail on the head? There's some attitude about doing people a favor. So, because of we live in an environment where there are no jobs, or where there appear to be not enough jobs, you have employers who tell people, I'm doing you a favor, look outside on the streets. There are many people who are working out there, I've given you an ID card, I remember reading one interesting article, and Zibby knows the industry I'm talking about, and that your ID card gives you the ability to go and print money, be creative. And what I tell people is that that's the first excuse for graft by members of staff, because you actually tell them that they have a right to take whatever they see because it's theirs, as you are not paying them what they are owed. And it also gives you, they will never give their best. They will walk into the office, they will give you mediocre service, they will give you medical outputs. Their customer service will be rubbish. and you complain that they're not doing the best, they will not do the best because they are not motivated to do the best. The cost of living is high enough. Transporting yourself out of your house today, even if you're coming by public transport, will cost you an arm and a leg. So imagine someone have to do that for an entire month and not getting paid.
Well, I've got a message, and this is Dami from Ikeja. Dami says, considering the type of disruptions that we face anytime a president comes to town, should we be considering declaring public holidays anytime they visit? The only reason the states aren't paying salaries on time or paying ridiculous wages is because of the failure of governance. Another message coming through from Joseph Menyi, and he says, why aren't other ports activated? Apapa is a nightmare already. Transferring Lekki isn't there a way to know that access roads haven't been built to accommodate the refinery and the ports? The government should be rational by developing and encouraging other ports in other states. Let's move on to Vanguard. And this one says, farmers lament high cost of fertilizers, limiting food production. Now, the chief executive officer of a farm said the farmers are now limited to little expanse of farmland due to unabating cost of fertilizers and other farm inputs. He said even when the fertilizers are bought with exorbitant prices, most of them are discovered to be substandard, and this has compounded the woes of the farmers.
Okay, I'll take a step back to last week Tuesday when we talked about I think it was last week Tuesday or so, or maybe last week. I think last week Tuesday or sometime. We actually spoke about the inflation figures for December. We talked about that we had a reduction in inflation rates from when we compared November and December. But we also looked at when we looked at the details, we saw that the headline number that stood out was the food inflation actually increased in that period. And we attributed this somehow to the increased demand, obviously, for December, for foodstuff in December due to celebratory periods. But there's also for most of us, when we look at 23%, and for some of us who go to the markets, go to shops to buy stuff, when we benchmark that 23%, and obviously in calculating those figures, they are looking at some particular contributions or particular products that contribute to those numbers. When we look at the prices of food stuff that have come to our tables from the markets, some of us will say that number is pretty low. 23% is pretty low. We talked about all the other things like security, people leaving the farms and all that, but this is a major issue. And this is largely the large reason for this actually for last year is obviously the Russia-Ukraine war. Now, the second largest producer of fertilizers globally is Russia. And I think the other country that does quite a chunk of potash, because of typically, I think the most common type of fertilizer, NPK. So potash is a major country, is Belarus. So both countries are suffering sanctions at the moment, which prevent them from moving a lot of their products, some of which are fertilizers or fertilizer inputs, out into international markets. And also there's the disruption of the global supply chain. So the reduced supply of these products, obviously, to meet demand, has basically led to an increase in price. So we're basically caught in the point where we do not have enough fertilizers to be able to, contribute to add to our production process in our market, into our farming process. And obviously with that, what they're saying basically is they're able to do less cultivation, cover less land. And obviously with that, there's less production, which means less output, more prices, because there's higher demand for those few things. So somehow we have to find a solution to this problem, short-term, long-term, either reduce our dependency. There's been talk of using organic fertilizers, and there's a limitation for organic fertilizers. So I'm sure the farmers, obviously, they've been doing this for years. On the smaller, lower scale, they're able to use some level of organic fertilizer input into their production process. But there's a large dependency on the inorganic fertilizers, which is what is short at the moment. So I don't see much of solutions to this problems. We see the farmers are lamenting, and we're hoping that someone is out there is looking at a solution to solve this problem, because it's hitting every one of us.
I've got a message. Tony from Ikeja says the fear of traffic congestion on the Lekki axis is as a result of poor planning by both the Lagos state government and Abuja. The thing is, whatever project they carry out that doesn't impact negatively Okay, I'm not too sure I get that the way it's written, but the message continues. The Lekki rail line should have been commissioned first before the seaport, but the traffic lockdown because the president is visiting. Use technology. Cut the tape via Zoom. Okay. Francis from Ojo says the government can also think of constructing and developing seaports in Badagry, which has a body of water. At least that will decongest the Lekki Aja axis when the seaport is functional. We then go back to the same issues as along the Apapa Oshodi Expressway. Okay, let's move
Sorry,
on.
Zibby. Just to add to that, my greatest fear with the Lekki port is, I hope, like it happens in Nigeria, they don't abandon their Papa Tinkan access, because what you tend to find now is everybody wants to do business through the Lekki port, and you just forget about their Papa access, and that will be it will be.
Mm,
I
okay,
will find the right word.
let's move on to the Vanguard. The International Council of Nurses says wealthy countries recruiting nursing staff from some of the world's most fragile health systems is extremely hard to justify and should be stopped entirely. Now, the ICN has listed 7 or 8 wealthy countries, notably Britain, the United States, and Canada, and they state that they're driving 80% of international nurse migration just to try to settle their own domestic shortages.
um, in as much as I agree with a lot of the things mentioned in this news, one thing which is true, because we know that over time, some of these developed countries have just neglected those kind of occupations, nursing, and a number of them. But the fact for me is this: there are opportunities not just for the individuals but also for the countries. So when you look at one thing that they mentioned between the UK and the Ghanaian government of paying them £1,000 per nurse recruited, it's ridiculous that a country will agree to that, with so much investment in your human capital, and all of a sudden what you get in return as the basis of that development is £1,000, 900 and, or how much is that, 903,000 naira is what you get. It can't even pay the salary of the nurses for 6 months. And this for me is where governments should start looking at how they create a system of better negotiations for migration. People will migrate either which way, and mostly because of economic benefits. But we should also start to look at this kind of migration, so that we don't lose the best hands that you have. It's also a form of development for those people also, because they'll probably work in better facilities. But I've seen it in Nigeria over time, in the 80s, in the 90s, in the 2000s, in the 2010s. Now it's the 2020s, and every time you lose so many, and every time those young people grow up to become the leaders at the top, of course, because they are not developing in your own country, you have another flock of people who are moving every 10 years, every decade. And that for me is where African nations and governments should start looking at the kind of policies for those kind of specialized occupations, towards driving the migration and also becoming beneficial to them, aside from the fact that those people would also bring in, what's it called, foreign currency back into the country through repatriation. But 80%, 90% of this news is absolutely correct.
So I'd like to also, yeah, so this is the thing I have. Obviously, you look at, obviously there's free movement, there's the right of the individual to aspire for a better life. And that's what has driven this thing. Nurses are not just picking up their bags and saying, I want to go to the UK because I like to go to the UK. At least most of them aren't. They're going there because of their better opportunities. The same thing has to happen to the doctors. The same thing that is threatening to happen to teachers. And Africa is bleeding. Yes, you might criticize what Ghana has done. I think Kenya has done something similar, where they're actually collecting about £1,000 or something for each of those guys. But imagine that those guys would have left for nothing in those countries. So at least they're getting something back, in quote. Maybe they can negotiate a bit better and sort out their problems. But what we need to look at is, are we creating the right environment for those people to grow and thrive? And that speaks to larger issues in the economies of those countries. And even when you look at the amount of money, what they are collecting now, what are those funds being used to do? Are you going to, if they take that £1,000, is that going to be reinvested back into growing, into educating more nurses for the future? Is that going to be invested back into the sector, ensuring that they have the facilities that they need to be able to become better nurses in the future? Those are the kind of questions that we need to ask. Those are things that needs to be strengthened. If not, it's going to happen to once there's a shortage in every sector in the developed world, they will look at where they can get it. Either they will do it officially or they will do it unofficially. And there's really nothing we can do to stop it.
Okay, let's move on to The Nation. NASIMA, which is the Nigerian Association of Chambers of Commerce, Industry, Mines and Agriculture, is calling on the government to take urgent steps to address the rising public debt through fiscal policies and public expenditure controls across government levels. Now, the president of NASIMA did speak about the debt profile and the budget 2023, which does have a deficit of about 11.34 trillion naira.
Okay, NASIMA and organizations in this place do this from time to time to remind us of what our economic realities are. And like every other person who has spoken about this issue when it comes to our rising debt profile, they're basically calling out for the same thing, which is we need to align our fiscal and we need to allow our monetary and fiscal policies to be able to sort out the problems that we have. They're adding to the fact that government also needs to look at the spending and tighten its spending, reduce its spending, or basically just spend right. The fear of NASIMA, obviously, that our debt keeps on increasing and we're going to hand this from government to government and we keep on accumulating debt. Obviously, one of the things that we've seen even in the presidential campaigns and for this last government is that there's an emphasis on infrastructure or on building infrastructure, growing infrastructure. The cynic in me always says when public officials go and spend a lot of money in building bridges and public infrastructure, you need to check the prices, but that's the cynic in me. In reality, Nigeria does have an infrastructure deficit, which needs to be improved. The question, and I will always ask anybody, is that when we spend money on infrastructure, can this infrastructure pay for itself long or mid-term? Those are the questions we need to ask ourselves. Or are we just building infrastructure for the sake of politics? A lot of our, apart from spending for or borrowing for infrastructure, a lot of our borrowing also have been to pay salaries. And we need to solve that problem one way or the other. We're spending a lot more on our subsidies, which we also need to solve. There's too much on the plate for the next government because basically this government has put everything in file and is in the out file, in the out tray for the next government to pick up. But the next government needs to take a very good look at it. And they need to be very, very careful and systemic in the way they sort out these problems. Last week I was at an event and somebody was showing us the graph of the inflation rates in Sudan. And one of the critical things that happened in 2019 in Sudan was the change in government and removal of subsidies. They removed their fuel subsidy, changed their government, and they had to go to the IMF to get, IMF basically gave them, this is what you need to do to be able to get our loans. And the impact of that over a period of time was increased inflation. They're just recovering from it now. So while we need to take a lot of these steps, the government basically needs to plan these steps and look at them and how do we take these steps and reduce the burden on the individual Nigerian such that we can retain some stability and Nigerians can still go out there and do their best to grow this nation, which is what we need to do.
All right. Well, that's all the time that we have for Freshly Pressed this morning. Thank you so much, Chibuzor. Thank you, Uade, for joining us.
Thank you for Zibby.
Listening. And that is it for Freshly Pressed. Do stay with us. There's a lot more to come on the Smooth Breakfast.
Okay, guys. Have a great day.
Last week.
Yeah.
So I think one of the CEOs for Sudan, he basically showed us a graph of how their